best power
stylish.
dressers. Yes, I
Yeah.
thought that
Oh my
it's very
God.
stylish. It's
That is
always giving,
dressing
yeah.
down, dressing up is
Mm,
awesome.
It's sight for sore
okay.
eyes, and especially when we have to read the news sometimes, it's good to just look and behold
Hmm.
something good.
Don't
All
believe the
right.
hype.
All right, so this is how you can join the conversation. If you want to see beyond listening, go onto our YouTube channel, youtube.com smooth981fm is the handle to look for.
Yes, and on WhatsApp, that WhatsApp number is 0809 Let's get right into it. The Guardian has this headline: Marketers fail to offtake 450,000 metric tons of cooking gas amid demand price hike. According to the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Limited, they said the country's LPG production remains undermined by the lack of refineries, also forcing companies to deploy butane to help to bridge the domestic demand gap. Now, this offtake deficit, as described by NLNG, what's the implication on its use, the supply, and probably revenue?
See, no need to overcomplicate things. The dollar short of all this grammar they are speaking here is that the cost of gas, cost of cooking gas. This is why the cost of cooking gas is going up. One of the reasons why. I don't know the last time you bought cooking gas,
That's
but
not
I know I bought sometime this week, and 12.5 kg cooking gas is over 6,000 naira. It used to be
already.
just slightly. Yeah, it was. If you recall, earlier this year it was probably over 3,000, and it went to over 4,000. It's now
Yes.
6,000.
6,000.
Yeah.
The
That's
one
the
that
last
used
I
to,
bought.
yeah, the one
That's
that
a
used to,
small gas,
Well,
right?
yeah,
the last time I bought 3 weeks ago was 5,000
yeah, it's gone up. It's over 6,000. So and all this grammar they are speaking here, and this one, that's what's going on, and just goes to show how inefficiencies typically, cause
Lakumi said she
spikes.
bought it for 7,000 yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Oh, so that
Straight
means it's
away.
going up. So this is just so that's why I said sometimes when you see all these things and they just because at the end of the day, this is just what it means
Yes.
that when you have shortage in supply and demand is still there, prices do go up. And these are the things that add up to inflation rate. So is anybody going to come and tell me now that this is exchange rate or this is what exactly is going on here? This is something that we have in abundance here locally. And we actually have a local organized company, corporation, one of the biggest in the world, that actually does this here. So why should we be paying this much for for cooking gas? It's just crazy expensive. And there's really nothing to analyze here, Valentine, beyond the fact that at this rate, if we keep going this way and you don't have enough supply of cooking gas in the market, people are going to be spending as much as 8-9 thousand for cooking gas, and this adds to cost of food. And if you look at inflation, the component that keeps basically dragging inflation all the way up is food. Food inflation is still over 20%, and Nigerians spend a huge chunk of their money on food. So these things, when you see them, this is what it means. It's not just like it's not just brandishing numbers out there or trying to explain one or two things. The effect here is when you have inputs that you use to cook go up, then that has a reverberating effect on the entire economy. So
So thank you to our listeners who have come in with eyewitness reports. Eyomi said that cooking gas is now 7,000. Corroborating what Lakumi said. Daily Wad
oh,
says that in Magbo Ogun State it's sold for 7,500 naira. Noyen Lom Oracle on YouTube also said it's 7,500 naira as at yesterday. So as at
crazy.
today, I don't know what the price would
So
be.
that is over 100% increase.
In the past 2
Yeah,
months.
I mean, it's just incredible. So how do you do that? Like, how do you explain things like this? You're gonna blame this on this exchange rate now. So that's what happens when you have a lot of inefficiencies in the system and people who
But they did mention exchange rate as part of the challenge.
yes,
Yeah,
to
but
but I mean
produces locally, though.
but a lot
Yeah,
of these
even
things are
like
done locally.
importing,
So
yeah.
so typically, all products are benchmarked in USD just so that you can get international
Yeah.
price. But gas itself, um, Nigeria fixes the price of gas locally, right? So that shouldn't be the major reason why it's like. And if you read through, you see that it's because of supply related issues. Not enough.
I like how you started, Ugodre, when you said, there's no need for us to speak big English on this one because that's what you hear in the rhetoric. For instance, if this is challenged now, the rhetoric would be, grandstanding, big grammar will be used to explain things away.
Yes,
But
no. That's why butane this, butane that.
Sorry, let me
Please.
just read Shion's. Let me read Shion's comment. I'm sure you're being very naughty. We distance ourselves from this comment. Shion said Abi Abuke FX has been posting cooking gas prices.
let's move on to this next one.
uh,
New Telegraph, not so cheering story, but this is a threat from coming from the indigenous people of Biafra, the group proscribed by the federal government as a terrorist organization. They are saying that if the federal government does not bring out Nnamdi Kanu for his next hearing on October 21st, which is the next adjourned date for his court case, for him to testify or for him to appear before the court, that they are going to lock down that region for 1 month.
Hmm.
This is not, it's beyond the stay-at-home order for, single days, but we're going into a months-long lockdown. Based on the submissions of the federal government and the counterparty, the IPOB and Nnamdi Kanu and everything, how do you see this playing out?
I hope this is a threat that won't materialize, and that's because I sense that there is some kind of frustration in the southeast as well, especially in southeast states where you have all these, excuse me, lockdowns. I think I was reading the news yesterday or something where I've forgotten that state where they basically lynched, an IPOP guy.
Yeah.
You're right. For for trying to impose, sit at home or whatever lockdown in the market, and people were just really frustrated. And so in trying to impose that, sitting all that, they were scattering everywhere, and then they just took on the guy. So, you get to a point where the reason why you even have, IPOB and the rest of them today being able to enforce some of these things is because people are just willing to accept it. But it comes a time where people won't accept it because a lot of all these powers derive from people really. So whether it's the silence of the people or the vocal support of the people, either way, that's where the powers come from. At some point, they will get tired, and that's really where I get worried. I hope that the state governments are looking at these things and taking it seriously. It's unlikely. I don't even think it's possible that they lock down an entire region for a month. It's not going to happen, right? And just remember that I think there's an election coming up in Anambra State in a couple of months or so. So these things all have sort of effect. So I hope that the government as well bring out now. I mean, if he's in court, then it should have his day in court. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't have his day in court, or why should it, out of court. So. But be that as it, state governors need to take this seriously. We don't want to see anarchy or violence in this. I think it's just one too many, and this is also towards the Christmas season as well, where people are already making plans to come back for the holiday. And my God, this economy needs diaspora Nigerians to come back. You need that money in here. Yeah, you need them in.
No,
here.
I was going to say qualify that. Please don't change your money before you come. Bring the dollars, bring the pounds, bring it. Don't bring currency that you need to change into dollars into that. No. Bring the dollars and pounds. That's what we want. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Now that we don't know. Okay, but we seem to have.
Just call your local. You know what I mean. Call your BDC. They will tell you.
All right. So IK says on IPOB 1 month sit at home. I'm an Igbo man. I do not support IPOB. The good thing about this IPOB new sit at home policy is that even people who be in the cause are losing interest.
Buyer from the mainland, or person rather from the mainland, said gas prices are benchmarked against Montalvo, an international benchmark, which happened to be on the rise since April of this year due to the increase in global demand. So obviously, being priced in USD subject to foreign exchange. Another factor that has contributed is the introduction of VAT in the costing of the products by federal government earlier in the year, which was not the case before. Let's move on to an interesting story here from the Punch newspaper. The Ondo State Governor, Mr. Rotimi Akeredolu, has berated his counterpart in Kaduna State, ElRufai, Malam Nasir ElRufai, over the latter's comments on anti-open grazing law. ElRufai described it as being signed, described the signing of the anti-open grazing law by the southern governors as unrealistic. Now, in a reply, Akeredolu said that it is a hysteric ploy by ElRufai to externalize banditry. If I were to paraphrase, almost saying why are you asking that we open our doors to the bandits that you're chasing out of the states? Do you see it the same way?
Um, I look at this story in from two angles, and I say, one, this is democracy, right? So, I mean, different political leaders can have different opinions, and you can have in one region you practice a different kind of law, and in another region you practice a different kind. It happens everywhere in the world. In the US, everywhere they have. There's some states you go to in the US. This is what they prefer. Other states, so that happens. And I think the southern states, particularly southwestern states, um, they don't want to see, open grazing. They don't want it in their regions, and that's really what they don't want. They don't want it. So the most you can do is just disagree, right, with them. But they don't want it. So if you want it in your own region, then you can as well go ahead and do that, which is fine. And that's what you see happening. But where I seem to have an issue, Val, is when you see governors start to just, go all the way low and start to just sort of exchange words and abuse themselves. These are people in the same parties. And like, what is always wrong with these people? Like, can't you just, there are better ways of like disagreeing. Okay, look, if that's what you want in your state, it suits your economy, that's fine. But here, my people don't want it. But you can't just, what was those things he said again? From all indications, Governor ElRufai, if he was properly quoted and his views not missing, you know him now, call him and ask him now.
So
He's struggling too hard to export banditry.
Yeah, he said something here, and Ugo said in the last thing I think there's something, that it's a layered statement where he said his opinion, ElRufai's opinion is laced with mischief. What would he mean by that?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. And I think maybe these are all because of some of his insistence and utterances in the past. And we know very well that a lot of northern governors are vehemently against this, anti-open grazing law, even at the presidency level as well. They're very much against it. And in a democracy, it's fine. You can have for and against, right? But I mean, when you start to degenerate into, name calling and abuse and characterizing thing, I don't know, especially when you're from the same party, it just doesn't sound.
I wanted to point
right
that
to me.
out. Does it not also speak of a deeper ethnic divide than we've seen, in past years, based on the fact that when it comes to party affiliation and ethnic identification, they would rather stand with ethnic, and we've seen it.
See, in this Nigeria,
yeah.
sorry, but in Nigeria, they print from this is Ugodre's opinion, ethnicity first, followed by religion, then money, like your interest, yes, money,
Scale of preference.
yes.
So your first
Then
idea,
political affiliation now comes in.
Ethnicity,
That's how
religion, money,
that's how
political
it
affiliation.
works here.
are you sure money doesn't come before religion?
No. I'm
It
telling
does
you for
not.
free.
One begets
So
the
long
other.
as you were not in conflict or those things are not. So ethnicity first. People, where are you from?
Where you
First,
from,
if there's an argument, where are you
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Then you're going to religion and
Yes.
money. Because if there's money today, and I come and say, this guy, this is Valentine, won't be from our place, so we're not supposed
Of
to.
course, you won't. Yeah.
So
Because-
people get affected by things like that naturally, and I don't even think it's a Nigerian problem really, but
And people turn
mostly
down
here.
jobs or even money opportunities based on their religion.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right.
So that's my own thinking. I think ethnicity first, religion, money, then you start to have political inclinations and maybe cultural, beliefs and all that. That's how these things just work out, and that's what you're seeing playing here. So even with people in the same political party, you still have a lot of all these ethnic affiliates because people tend to think like that a lot. But it's not an excuse for political leaders, to be honest. I think that for a lot of people down south, it's understandable that there's support for anti-open grazing laws because people see what's happening in the north with banditry and all that, and they don't want something like that here. We actually think that there are better ways of grazing rather than have people just roam around and so they don't want it here. But if it's something that is needed outside, in other parts of the country, that's fine. And I'm sure that if you continue there and you show that it's working well and there's peace and the economy is booming, people will come back again and want to rewrite those laws. But if a state like in Lagos as well is signing one, come on.
Exactly. In fact, some people feel like Me's message says the hierarchy is for the masses, for the political class, it's money first.
I was going to say, Ogo is speaking for the streets,
Yeah,
speaking for the
yes, he
masses.
is.
I'm telling you for sure, even for politicians.
I'd like to go to that third level of the hierarchy, money. Senate approves 2022 to 2024 MTEF. That's a medium-term expenditure framework. Pegs all benchmark at $57. Exchange rate at 410 naira to a dollar. Is this realistic? I've been looking through the story and the details.
Oh, first of all, this was put forward. I think the first time we saw the MTEF was in July, and for our dear listeners, MTEF is typically that template that the National Assembly needs to approve first before a budget is put forward by the presidency. And so, once MTEF is approved, a lot of times all the back and forth about budget are sorted out already, and that's why you get budget signed early. And I think one thing this government has done over the last few years is get budgets signed pretty early, approved pretty early. I think this year's budget was approved like by December, or so, and signed into law. Yeah. So what the MTF does is basically just set the ground rule for that. The only thing is that MTF is usually every 2 years, right? But we seem to, as in, it's drawn for 2 years, but we seem to do it every year. And that's because of the way things change. But key thing to note here: fiscal deficit at 5.6 trillion. What that means in simple English is that we will spend more than we earn by 5.6 trillion.
Wow.
So if you today earn in your household 100 naira, what you're telling your family is that this month we will spend 150.
Where's the money going to come from?
Exactly. So with fiscal deficit of 5.6 trillion, the National Assembly also approved fresh borrowing of 4.8 trillion. So that fresh borrowing is what basically plugs the hole that a fiscal deficit creates. So, but why are we always in a fiscal deficit? There's a fiscal deficit because government's revenue has crashed by at least over 40% in the last few years. And like we were saying before the show, I think it's very likely that we'll run fiscal deficit for the next 5 years, if not a decade. That's what I think, because it's going to take time before you start to see government revenues climb again.
Because we have to recoup all the debt.
Yeah, not even that. You have to earn that revenue, and oil prices are nowhere, close to where it was, a decade ago. We're nowhere close to that, and so oil still remains the mainstay of government's revenue. Taxes are beginning to climb, but it's going to take a while before you see taxes, start to plug some of this hole. That's why you see a lot of aggression from tax authorities, and you see fight over, VAT.
We've even projected for 2.2 trillion.
Yeah, it's because like
revenue from tax.
From taxes, yeah. Like I said, taxes are going to be, like they say, follow the money. Taxes are going to be the new bone of contention in this country. It's not going
I'm
to be
just wondering
oil.
why they're including VAT when they're not sure who's going to get the VAT.
Well, for now, it's so long as it's still the Supreme Court to decide, they have to put it in there, right? And actually, for those of us who even follow this VAT story, we actually think the federal government will benefit more from VAT. That's for sure. But back to this one. So we're going to borrow more, obviously, from an trillion, and that's going to be, it will include foreign debts as much as local debt. But what is also interesting is recurrent non-debt expenditure. We have a way of just always increasing that one. That one never stays.
Nobody should touch it.
It's always good. So more salaries, more expenditure. Government must enjoy. They must buy cars. They must spend everything. They must do it. And you're seeing 6.2 trillion there for next year. Now the issue is, as typically when you have huge revenue shortfalls, what most countries do is usher in. I know people don't like to hear this word austerity or cuts. People start to demand a lot of budget cuts. Now, you systematically demand budget cuts in a way that it doesn't negatively impact on an economy that is just coming out of a recession. Because by the time you start to cut, like recurrent expenditure, that can affect growth. But the point is, and this is where I typically would want to see more from the National Assembly, how well are they grilling MDAs and on their own budget, on their recurrent expenditure. Why are we spending so much? Why are we still at that kind of level when it's obvious that our earnings have basically crashed? Because all we're doing is we're borrowing to fund recurrent expense. We're borrowing to fund salaries, to be civil servants, and that's really what we're doing. And of course, interesting to note that even capital expenditure, this based on this MTF, is slightly lower than what it was, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So we're spending less on capital expenditure and spending more. And so if you go on to the story, people in the National Assembly are a little bit skeptical about things. They're worried, even though they've approved it. Some are saying, look, we're borrowing too much. Maybe it's time, we start to look, elsewhere. Where else do you look at? Sell assets.
When you lump in the 4 billion euro bond raise that they just did for 3 days
Yeah,
before
yeah.
does it help in any way or make it worse?
No, the $4 billion that we raised is part of the borrowing that was approved for this year now. So they are saying that we'll borrow another one next year, bro. So that's what they're saying. So, and we would keep piling on that. Because I mean, guys, it's really simple. If you have revenue shortfall, like I just use a simple math,
Yeah.
you're earning 100, and your expenses is 150. The only way you can make up the difference is either you sell an asset, right, or you borrow, because it's obvious that you can increase. In fact, that 100 next month is probably going to be 80. So we're basically borrowing our way out, and without cutting, expenses, it's just nothing we can do, and that's basically what I'm saying.
Akintoye says, do we really have a way out of this fiscal deficit? When is the government ever going to earn more than we spend? It just doesn't seem right to continue borrowing to fund our current largesse. Hopefully, the lenders will be ready to forgive the loans again. That's my only hope too.
But the thing is, if
They
someone
won't.
is borrowing money from you and the person is living a lavish lifestyle, isn't it wise for that person to cut down their expenses?
You can actually run a physical deficit for forever. Even there are countries that are running physical deficit for even a lot of very rich countries. But the thing is that if your borrowing cost is very low, right, and then you're borrowing mostly in your currency,
Yeah.
then you can manage. But then the most important part is that deficit that you are funding. What exactly are you using it for? So if we're funding physical deficits and the economy is growing in tandem, so that's why you look at deficit as a percentage of GDP and things like that. You have start to put a lot of relative indices. Then in a way you can say it's fine, because if you're borrowing to your household and your kids are doing well in grades,
Exactly.
you
They're
think
progressing.
you say, okay, there's a lot of progress. At some
Yes,
point,
there's
by the time they
potential.
graduate, they can
Yes.
pay off these loans for
Thank
me,
you.
and blah blah. So that's really how it works. But if you're borrowing all this money and it's just going into people's pockets and being fleeced away, and you're just creating more problems for the future generation and making it even harder to put this country on the right path. Because some of us want to see this country, achieve that so-called, giant
Yeah.
Africa that we say for the last 30 years.
All right. Thank you so very much. A giant of Africa with a National Assembly building with leaks. All right. So, Punch Newspaper reports a National Assembly building now dangerous for lawmakers. Elumelu laments decay. The minority leader of the House of Representatives, Ndudi Elumelu, has lamented the dilapidated state of the National Assembly complex, where the rooms of the White House section of the building leak whenever it rains. So obviously, the rains are in, the leaks are out. What do you think about this? They're saying it's a matter of urgency and it should be addressed.
It's embarrassing. We saw this I think it was on social media some time
Yeah.
ago, where you saw
Buckets.
bucket and legislators were by the side, they were looking at it, and everybody with cameras and videos. Hey, Nigeria, oh, and maybe we'll see every day, everywhere. Like,
Yes.
this is Nigeria, so it's nothing. It's no different, and I don't expect that you should expect to see this in National Assembly as well. So even where they play football stadium, you see rain ball, you see most government offices where that you go to, it's like that. I mean, airports. It was like, what's the big deal? It's just that National Assembly is a symbol of governance in this country, and it's pretty much embarrassing to see things like that as Nigeria. But you know what? That's really what this is just representative of what the country is in general. dilapidated infrastructure. That's part of what we're saying. So now they will now allocate money to go and fix.
Can
what
one
they
of
should
them
have
not
done.
decide to do it as a goodwill?
Where is it? How? Where will it go?
Last year, have you forgotten last year when they gave a budget, estimated budget to rebuild the national?
I was going to say, why people did not give them their bid.
But the thing is that, and to your point, Ayo, why they can't actually get people to do it for them.
Yeah,
I mean, there are
exactly,
corporations,
private,
yeah, they can just come and I
It
mean,
shouldn't
just
come
just
out
do
of
it
our
for
budget.
them.
It
Yeah,
shouldn't be budgeted for. We should have, yeah.
they could do things like
But
this.
there's a risk to that, isn't there? If you allow private establishments to invest in your federal structure, what's the stake? What gives for them?
The only thing they get sometimes is a tax
rebate.
Yeah,
Not even that. I don't even think any. So
It's-
the tax rebates that come from infrastructure, private sector infrastructure funding, I don't think covers things like that. So if any organization was going to do this, it would just be pro bono. And the only downside risk there is what Valentine just said. I mean, are you going to expect something in return? And typically, that's what usually
So
happens.
let's just put it out there. This is our own contribution to the leaking roof at
Please, they should keep
the
the
house.
first,
We're appealing
give us
to
light.
corporate bodies to kindly help us.
Can you please?
That's one fix. We'll fix one thing at a time. All right, let's move on to let me see now. Which one shall we take? Crisis. That's where the crisis in Kano State, as Ganduje retains revenue boss, defies legislator. Now, having read this story, Ugo, I had a thought on it, but listening to what you said before the show, it's an interesting perspective. But let me just give people details. Crisis is imminent in Kano State between the executive and the legislature, as Governor Abdullahi Ganduje has defied the resolution of the House of Assembly, which called for the sack of Kano Internal Revenue Service Chairman Abdul Razak Salihu. There's a litany of his offences in this report. But please, your thoughts on this one?
Well, most times when lawmakers are after you, it's usually on that ladder. It's usually not ethnic. It's not religious. It's usually the third one. It's usually money issue. Yeah. So follow the money and you follow the real reason why this is happening. But they're after this guy and they passed a resolution to get him out. We've seen a lot of resolution passed by lawmakers in the past, even at the federal level. I remember this happened a lot during Obasanjo's era, and where you see National Assembly officers, they just don't like you, and then they pass all sorts of resolutions and there's been an argument whether this is binding or not, and I think it's really not binding. I don't think it's binding on the executive to accept. Resolutions are strong, right, because basically the people saying that they don't like you, right? And so in some other climes you can resign and just move on, but in Nigeria that's not what's going to happen. And the governor wasn't even around when this happened, and then he's back and he's saying, look, this is my chief tax collector. Why am I going to take him out, right? You're not even going after the commissioner of finance, and you're going after my chief tax collector. So I'm not going to take him out. And to the lawmakers, their point is that, look, we've seen tax revenue dwindle, as basically crashed below what you're getting in Kaduna. You're doing 30 billion when Kaduna is doing 50 billion. Very, very paltry when you compare it to Lagos State, because that's what Lagos State does monthly also. And so based on that, they think he's ineffective. But I would think that, because if you really study Kano economy very well and how things go on there, it's really beyond that. It's actually the way that Kano is also set up. There's just so many anti-economic laws on around Kano that affects their businesses and ability for business taxes to pay, for government to collect taxes, because government collect taxes from businesses, right? So those taxes don't just come from thin air. So if businesses don't have the right environment to thrive, they're not going to pay you taxes. It's a dwindle. So you gotta look at it from that angle. So that's why you look at the story, and when you read it, you think that they are doing it for the masses. They're trying to do, please.
We're out of time.
On YouTube, somebody here says, Dapo says, I'll give 1,000 naira towards the
I was going to say that our listeners
they're donating already.
started
Wow.
a GoFundMe
Roof-
for the
roof-
roof project.
Please, charity begins at the investor here first.
Man, what do we need to do? This is our general
But
assistance.
I can tell you for free, if nobody launches a GoFundMe on that thing, you will see different. I mean, it might be funny, but people will just drop.
Yes. Tolu is saying that Val should not stop me from fundraising for my beloved country and its House of Reps. All right, thank
Oh,
you also
geez.
very much. We have a number of comments on our WhatsApp platform, which we will take during Lagos Talks 981. We'll start the conversation that way. And then, of course, open the phone lines if you have anything to say. If you want to be the chief fundraiser, we'll have to see your credentials to know that you will be accountable. DME says,
Okalawa.
Okalawa, oh, nice one, DME says, thanks for the insights, Ugo. And on that note, we'll say thank you, Ugo Dre, for coming this morning. And thanks to all our listeners. You see, we have celebrity listeners as well. By the way, Dayami was he's done a number of movie projects, Singer Boys.
Yeah,
He's doing a number
yeah.
of
Hey,
projects,
my
yeah.
celeb friend.
Yeah.
So that's our claim to fame this morning. But yeah, join us 8-10 a.m. for Lagos Talks 91.
Union Bank.
Go, my man.
Oh
Sorry.
my God.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very
Oh,
much.
hala.
Thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Headlights.